Commission meeting started. If I could, I guess get a roll call.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Chairman Dibble? Vice Chairman Schrader?
Here.
Commissioner Zarguni is absent. Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner York?
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez is absent. Commissioner Mandel?
Here.
And Commissioner Salazar Garza. Here. Quorum established.
Okay. I guess moving on, can we get a approval of absences?
I make a motion that we
Mr.
approve.
Chairman, we have a public comment item
Oh, sorry.
under item 2.
Okay. You want to, I guess, is there a statement?
Right. So, Mr. Chair, just so you know, the audience can speak at public comment either as any comments they have in general, or if they want to speak to a specific item. But if they speak to a specific item now, they won't be able to when that item comes up. Just FYI.
Yeah. So on that, do we have anybody here wishing to make a public comment? We are going to go through these items one by one later, so you will have an opportunity to speak if you're here on a specific item. So is there any public comment at this time? All right. Being none, we'll close the public comment period and move to approval of absences.
I make a motion that we approve the absences of Commissioner Dibble, York, and Mandel.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on to the approval of minutes from the last regularly scheduled meeting on January 12th.
Commissioner Miller, I move that we approve the minutes as presented.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as written. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I guess moving on now to consent public hearing items A and B.
Mark Orozco, Senior City Planner, under the direction of Andrew Demas at Development Services. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and read into record the consent items A and B. Item A2, Flower Bluff Estates, number 2, Block 9, Lot 10A and 10B. It's a replat of .378 acres. That plat has met UDC and local government code standards. Continuing with the time extensions, we have 2. Item A3, Rancho Vista Subdivision Unit 24. It's a final plat of 13.30 acres. And item A4, Turtle Cove Center Unit 2, Block 1, Lot 7R1, replat of 5.22 acres. I'm going to go ahead and read items B5 on the new zoning. It's a case number 0122-01 for Javier de la Garza. It's a rezoning property at 2407 Mary Street. And this is a rezoning, and the correction is an RM1 zoning district, not the RS6. So it's going from the RM1 to the RS 4.5 single-family district. Next on the list is B6, case number 0122-05 for Land Majestic LLC, rezoning property at or near 302 Graham Road. It's a rezoning of RM1 from the RM1 multifamily district to the RV recreational vehicle park district. Next is B7, case number 0122-06 for Jackie Homes LLC, rezoning property at or near 7602 Yorktown Boulevard. This is a rezoning from the RS 4.5 single family 4.5 district to the RM1 multifamily district. The Technical Review Committee has reviewed items 2 through 7 and recommend approval. At this time, I guess staff can answer questions.
I guess no questions for staff. Do we need to open this portion up for a public hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. With no questions for staff, is there anybody who'd like to comment on consent hearing items A and B, items number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7? If you would, please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Joe Cramer, 1820 Walden Road. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am Joe Cramer, an active community leader in Flower Bluff. I have lived in Flower Bluff since 1981, and I am a homeowner. I hear daily of all the concerns and issues that happen in our Flower Bluff area. Pertaining 302 Graham Road rezoning case, agenda item number 6, the proposed zoning change will create a special district, one that can coexist with the existing neighbors and with the multifamily zoning in this area quite well, as been seen with Colonial Del Rey on Walden, Padre Palms on Skipper Lane, the Corpus Christi KOA on Caribbean. Laguna Shores is a prime development area for RV parks, shops, restaurants, and other businesses that draw tourism to this area. This picture makes it attractive to a lot of folks who come to Flower Bluff to fish, play, in the Laguna Madre, go birding, and soak up the sun. No doubt that RV parks generally generate very little tax revenue, but they help the community in other ways by leaving a small footprint while attracting businesses and local shops and stores, bars, and eateries. Please vote yes on agenda item number 6. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Keith Hanson. I live at 331 Graham Road. Own about 3 acres there. I'm a business owner in Corpus Christi, and I've been at that address for about 11 years now. The developers there have been doing a great job clearing out the area, getting rid of the brush, which has run the vagrants and homeless people off out of the brush, making it a little nicer to be there. I have to ask you to vote no at this point for this, because there's some issues with the width of the road and big RVs traveling up and down with the edges of the road crumbling already. The infrastructure, the sewage is not there. I haven't heard of any of the improvements that are going to be brought in with this development. I haven't seen any other planning for this. I've been told a few different things, but I believe that it's a good idea for the area once that infrastructure's been put in. Flower Bluff has been neglected by the city in these developments as they put in subdivisions all over the place lately. Now they're having to go back and relook at the roads and put in stoplights and stop signs to make so people can get in and out of their neighborhoods. I just don't want to wake up one minute with a 40-foot RV laying in the ditch with people dead. You know, there's a lot of issues that play there. You know, this development should spur other development in the area, and it will. But if the infrastructure's not down that road, the other acreage all around there can't develop. Part of developing and part of the rules have been for roads, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, which we don't have. Wider roads, which the city owns the right-of-way already. They've taken that property. You know, there's supposed to be a 4-lane there. There's no sewer there, hasn't been there since, well, Flower Bluff was annexed, right? I'm just asking that y'all make everything get looked at before we approve something that's going to draw a lot of big traffic on that road and basically destroy the quality of life with that going on with no remedy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Spencer Fillmore, and I'm the owner and the developer of the boat stop, the new Texas Parks Wildlife Building there on Graham and Waldron, and potentially the developer of our property there on Graham and Waldron. Did you guys all get this? Have you not seen this? Is that okay if I? Should I hand out a hard copy? Where can we pull it up?
I can pull it up, no worries.
So we own and develop only our own properties, and so we just kind of put a quick little slideshow together. So these are just some. These are, of course, artistic renderings of what we're looking for there in that area for the RV park. This gives a little bit of a background of this area historically. Again, there's the storage. You guys see it on your screen? Good. So there's the storage facility, and then there's currently the zone multifamily there on Graham, which would bring significantly more traffic than RV use. And then, of course, there's all the area that's zoned heavy industrial, and it's kind of the remnants of Exxon's usage of oil and gas in that area. So our intent is to develop. We own 150 acres between Graham and Laguna Shores. So it's all that property. And so this gets a little bit of boat stop. We purchased the boat stop in 2016 and have added additional units there. Of course, people coming down to fish and enjoy the beauty of the area. Right now, we're in the middle of a project putting in a ramp and marina on Laguna Shores. This year, we're actually exciting. We're finishing up the Texas Parks and Wildlife, which is on Graham and Waldron. It's a beautiful facility, which will be the headquarters of the Texas Parks and Wildlife. You guys, did we lose the screen? I think, did it come back? Okay, there we go. We acquired at the beginning of the year the Exxon property. This is again 153 acres, 42 homeless camps. We, like Keith mentioned, quite a bit of debris that we had to remove. 10 semi-loads of it. Anyways, and then we're continuing kind of on our trajectory for that area and that street. And this is a rendering of what we're going to be doing to the boat stop. And this is the building we just built on Graham and Waldron. Another images of it. This is what we're under construction right now for the marina. And that's kind of sums up. So do you guys have any questions for me at all on the development of it? I think Keith brought up a couple points of like sewer. Clearly, sewer needs to come out. We would need sewer at this project. That's a permitting process. That's a platting process. Andrew and I would be, we'd be working through that. And the road. This is a little video. These are a few properties that we own. Can you guys see these? So we own really nice properties. They're beautiful. And they're immaculate and nice, and we would live there. I mean, I have lived there. They're fantastically nice, beautiful properties. So that's what we intend to build and keep and own for a long time. I was going to say that the sewer, and there is a big ditch there in front of our property. Our intent is to get rid of the ditch. But that would all be in the permitting once after zoning. So that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. We're here. We love Corpus Christi. You guys have great staff, and we love coming down here. We love being here. Appreciate
Anybody
it.
have questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Any other public comment at this time? All right, I'm going to close the public comment period on items 2 through 7 as presented. And be happy to take any motions.
I just have a quick comment. Just reminding everybody, especially the gentleman that lives nearby, that it's our job as the Planning Commission to make a determination on whether or not something's appropriate. Whether or not the infrastructure is there to be able to support it and things like that. That's all stuff that has to happen between the applicant and the developer and the and city staff whenever this thing goes towards construction. But it sounds like from your comments that that you agree that this development would be good if the infrastructure was there. So as Planning Commission, it's our job to, basically agree with you that it is appropriate for that area. And then whenever it goes into construction or permitting or anything like that, then all of those items get addressed. So That's my only comment.
Thank you.
I make a motion that we approve items 2 through 7 as presented by staff.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I guess moving on to item C, C8.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just for the record, Andrew Demas with Development Services. Let's see, we'll bring up the PowerPoint. And as you know, we have our a paired item with items 8 and 9. Both are involving Padre Island, Corpus Christi Island Fairway Estates, Block 45, Lot 13R, which is a replat of .402 acres. And as you know from more time to time, we have sidewalk waivers that come up as part of the platting process. And as no different, this case does have an attached request to not construct a sidewalk, to request that waiver. So here's on the screen the subject property, a generalized aerial view. It is to the north and west of the intersection of Whitecap Boulevard and SPID, also known as Park Road 22. As you can see, the mobility plan indicates a corridor study that's recommended, and there is a one-way cycle track. It is a TxDOT road, so it is not a city street. Here is a view of the subject property from SPID to the south and to the north. And here is one more shot from an adjacent property. And here's just a quick snippet of the plat itself that was submitted to staff. And of course, the only area that's in question with the waiver is its frontage along SPID Park Road 22. So as with every sidewalk waiver, we waive both pros and cons to things that support waivers and things that are against waivers. In this case, the factors in support is that there are currently no adjacent sidewalks, meaning there is no to and no from. It is just would be right now a piece of the network. There are open ditches, which can be looked at as both a pro and a con. Obviously, we don't want folks walking in ditches or in areas where a hazard exists. As a pro also towards sidewalks. Against is that obviously, like the previous item, it's not coming from anywhere and going anywhere, so it would just be one segment for the time being. Lastly, the waiver would not be detrimental to surrounding properties, nor would it have a negative effect. However, factors against the sidewalk waiver, which support construction, would be there's a plan, it is a TxDOT road, which eventually could be improved. This is a CR2 district property in which a street and a sidewalk can be started, meaning, yes, well, today it's one piece, but it is that every network has to start from somewhere. So I know, believe me, when I will review these cases, I do think about, is it truly a piece of a sidewalk from nowhere to nowhere? But in the grand scheme of things, we try to look things in the perspective of time. Sometimes they call it think fourth dimensionally, and that's time will catch up to where the network grows. That could be as properties adjacent replat, and they too will be required, or if TxDOT someday comes in, and as they are now, starting to repair portions of Park Road 22. Those factors could be considered, for granting the waiver, as those are going to happen down the line. Just food for thought. And then, of course, item number 5 and 6, which relate to our area development plans and Plan CC as a whole. Of course, we encourage sidewalk construction everywhere. We are Vision Zero City, which means we don't want folks placed in hazardous situations. We want them to have the ability as pedestrians or cyclists to traverse, any road that's out there. So as you can see, there are some pros and cons to weigh as part of your decision. Weighing and taking that all into account, we as staff, of course, disapprove granting the sidewalk waiver, but that doesn't mean that Planning Commission does have to weigh, again, all those factors in your deliberation and make a determination whether or not you wish to grant it. But if there are any specific questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Commissioner Miller?
Could you pull up the map again?
Yes, sir.
So from the new bridge over Park Road 22 to this this lot, what's the distance?
That's just the canal just to the south. That's roughly 100 feet or so to that south corner.
Okay.
But that's not the new bridge location.
Oh, you're right. The bridge
new
is much further to the
probably
north.
a quarter-mile
So
north.
you're right. That's I'm thinking of the other canal. Absolutely right. It's about a quarter to maybe close to half mile to the north is where the Park Road 22 bridge.
So this would be before it starts ramping up.
Okay. And could you go back to the image that shows the two retail centers? Right there. I've noticed, going to Rock and Roll Sushi or Surfside Sandwich Shop or whatever, this whole area gets super congested, and there's a lot of cars that park on the shoulder up and down that area. Where the sidewalk would be located on the property side of the ditch?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's my questions.
First, I don't know how you got somebody actually walking down Park Road 22, so that's ironic. Doesn't happen often, but it's pretty funny for this item. But want to second that. I live out on the island, so I'm in this area a lot, and there are cars parked here. Not that they're supposed to be, but I think putting sidewalk here would make it discourage people from parking, which actually would make it worse. But the two main things I wanted to bring up are, one, as always, cash in lieu of. I think this is another opportunity that's going to slip by where the city could have got money for future sidewalk, even though this is a TxDOT road. But the biggest thing here for me is drainage, like I usually bring up, because these are open ditches. If you put sidewalk here, it's going to be just like it happened down the street here at the Island grocery store, where they basically fill in a portion of the ditch and make the ditch smaller, reducing its capacity to put a little hill there and put a sidewalk on it. And this area is awful drainage-wise. Every time we get a big rain, the water's over the road in this specific area. So I can't support it, because it would have to be a bigger project, and it just doesn't make sense. I think it needs to be done as a TxDOT project where they tackle it, as a whole with Park Road 22. So again, would love to see a cash in lieu of amendment come through, so at least the city could make some money. That's all I got.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I do.
Questions?
You said that the nearest sidewalk was 950 square feet or something like that on the other page?
Let's see.
Or the nearest,
Yeah, it's White Cap is the nearest.
it's White Cap, the corner where the stripes is?
Yes.
Yes, so if you go back to that map.
I think it's in
overall
the
map,
staff report, but
Right there.
it would
Okay.
be down here in this area.
Yeah, I mean, I've been down that area. I don't live out there, but I've been out in that area, and I didn't remember it not having a sidewalk down 22, but I do remember it on White Cap. And I guess I'm just curious, when they built that stripe so long ago and they built that nice sidewalk there on White Cap, and it's a corner, why didn't they take that on? Being that it was on a corner, it's a main intersection? I mean, what happened?
Well, I think just very much like this discussion, the property owner or person developing the property is only responsible for their piece. So as adjacent properties develop, they complete their section of the network. So eventually you have an entire thoroughfare of sidewalks, but at the beginning, you end up with kind of juxtaposed pieces, and eventually they fill in. There's upside and downside. When an area is booming and it's filling in right after one lot after another, you don't really notice the difference. But when you have one piece develop and so many years for the next piece, you're going to have those gaps. That can be, like I said, a pro and a con against waivers, that if you know development is imminent, even if it's a few years down, you don't necessarily want to grant a waiver. It's going to come in fairly soon. But if you don't know when adjacent lots would redevelop or replat, assuming they're going to replat, you can't really assign a specific time frame.
Would have made it easier, to say, okay, let's get the sidewalk, but land doesn't even have anything to the right or to the left, and it just.
Well, I would say, we just had a meeting today with our consultants about UDC updates. I'm sure Nina's going to touch on it during the director's report. Those are excellent things to bring up when we talk about Article 8, which is all about how streets are designed, how sidewalks are continued, what the developer would be responsible for. And maybe that could be an opportunity to say, you need to find a connection to the nearest network. And it's a good point to bring up. And we also brought up cash in lieu of sidewalk, so hasn't fallen on deaf ears.
Good. Okay, any other questions for staff? Is the applicant here and want to speak on this item? Okay, being none, any other public comment on items 8 and 9? There being none, I'll close the public hearing on items 8 and 9, and I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we, make sure I say this right, approve item 8 and approve the sidewalk waiver of item 9.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
All righty. So
Moving on to item D, new zoning.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just again, for the record, Andrew Demas with Development Services. So we'll be talking about our last zoning case for the evening, Mostagassee Investment Trust, which is located roughly at 2020 Ramsfield Road. The request is from the FR Farm Rural District to the RS22 Single Family District. RS22, of course, signifying the minimum lot size, which would be roughly about a half acre. The subject property is located just to the north and to the east of the intersection of Rocher and Ramfield Roads. As you can see, here is a zoning pattern and adjacent development slide, which, again, the property is currently zoned FR. The proposed use is half-acre single-family residences. So the size of the property is roughly about 11 acres, which would be roughly 22 homes, 2 units per acre. To the north, you have agricultural properties, just as you have to the south and to the east. Adjacent to both the east and to the south are properties already zoned RS22. To the north and to the, south and west. To the north and to the east, you have properties that are zoned FR, still the farm rural zoning from the original annexation in 1961. I say all that to say there are adjacent properties already with the similar zoning district. However, as part of the public notification process, we sent out 4 notices. We received 2 in opposition, which roughly constitutes almost 11%. Now, based on staff analysis, we have reviewed the case, looked at all the various impacts. Main 2 impacts is, while the property is generally consistent, meaning it's hard to say every zoning case is going to check every single box of meeting an ADP or Plan CC. We try to, just like the sidewalk waiver, we weigh the pros and cons. I think one of the big cons in this case, and why you'll see our recommendation, is that this property is under APZ 1, which is Accident Potential 1 of the Air Installation Compatibility Use Zones, the ACUs. And so while the Navy doesn't say, Zone 1 is inherently more dangerous than Zone 2, Zone 1 would have a higher probability of an accident occurring. It's by no means a guarantee, but that is why you have the differentiation between those APZ districts. But keeping that in mind, the land use standards for ACUs says you're not to have any residential in APZ 1. The old saying is in clear zones in APZ 1, they want cows and crops. They do not want people by any means. But of course, us as Development Services, we do not want to render any piece of property undevelopable. So we thought a good compromise would be to recommend RE, residential estate. It would still be consistent with your land use plan. It would still be consistent with the ADP. However, these are now acre tracts, 1 unit per acre. So yes, it's not 100% in line with ACUs. However, it is not 100% in line with what the applicant is desiring, half-acre lots. So a good median would be we can reduce the danger by reducing it to 1 acre, reduce that density down, and also keeping in mind all those other factors. So that is our staff recommendation is denial of the RS-22. However, an alternative recommendation would be approving the RE residential estate district. And if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Commissioner Miller?
Have you discussed this with Mr. Pollock?
Yes, and while the Navy, and I will always say this very carefully, the Navy will never say approval or denial of any rezoning case. They do give comment, and the comment was the Navy prefers to stay in line with the ACU's recommendations, which is no residences in this area.
Is there an instrument that we could use as the Planning Commission to restrict any residential development in the APZ1 area of this property?
Short of the actual zoning itself. So you could choose to leave it as it is, FR, and there would be just one potentially single-family home, period. Or if you do choose another district, it could be RE, which is the 1 acre, RS-22, which is the half acre. Those would be your only controls at this point. There's always been a discussion about properties outside of the city limits, what to do with those. But inside the city limits, your zoning districts are the means of control of density.
Okay, because I mean, we've done stuff with limitations before, which I guess would be some sort of a special permit scenario.
It's a little easier to do with the multifamily because you can limit, you can have X amount of units at X density based on your acreage. In the single family zoning, because there are minimum lot sizes, that creates your de facto density, meaning you may have 15,000 square foot lots, 10,000, your RS6 or RS4.5, which is roughly, your 4.5 is about 8 to 9 units an acre. But in RE, it's of course 1 to 1.
And the most recent AQs was Walden Field expanded?
Yes, I have that on a slide that I can bring up. So the blue lines signify the new ACUS layer. So this area shaded in is APZ1, and this is 2. So it's more in line with 1 than 2. So that is why we didn't obviously want to split the zoning between RS-22 and RE. It wouldn't really make sense. And when it comes to how you actually work out the plat and lay out streets and finding the right lot sizes, it made more sense just to say for the entire tract, because it's entirely impacted by an APZ, that is why we feel it would be better to reduce the density to just a 1-to-1, 1 unit per acre.
But it looks like roughly half of the property is APZ1 and the other half is APZ2.
Correct.
And the 2009 AQs, what did this look like?
In the 2009, I don't think I brought that on a slide, but I would say in this area was not as heavily, or was actually just as much impacted. It was more 2 than 1 on the previous, the 2009 study, and now it's half and half between 1 and 2. So it's kind of, we're trying to find the middle option. APZ1 says nothing, no residences. APZ2 says 2 per acre. The happy medium between the two would be 1 per acre to cover both sides. So there's an old saying that when you come to a compromise, if both sides are upset, you usually found a good solution.
But the recommendation for APZ2 is still 1 dwelling unit per acre, correct?
2 dwellings. So APZ2, the Navy is, or I should say the standards say up to 2 dwelling units per acre. And in APZ1, it is 0.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Demas?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. the RS-22 zone, just south of that, do you know by chance when that was done?
All three, so we'll go back a few slides. In fact, we'll use this one.
Sorry.
These three zoning cases happened simultaneously in 2016.
Okay.
But all three of those are currently outside the APZ2.
This property is still touched, so the curvature of APZ2 is still affecting this property. So it is in line. 2 units per acre RS22 is in line with APZ2. The zoning made sense today as it did in 2016. The whole thing is being impacted by APZ1. One, we don't want to get into a situation where we impact the Navy's mission, but we also are dancing on the line as we don't want to negatively impact development. So finding that middle ground is always our goal.
And how is this property accessed?
Currently, it has a very small access on the plat that comes from Ranfield to the subject property. Now, these three properties are under common ownership, so we can only anticipate that when a plat comes in to actually develop the subdivision, they of course will have to have, streets that will curve and be able to have enough lot size for their septic systems. They'll have to accommodate for drainage. They'll have to accommodate for the other utilities. So by no means is it going to be a walk in the park to make this work, as you do see a pretty large, let me clear this, too many lines, a pretty large drainage area they'll have to kind of work around there. It's a naturally forming Resaca.
And did the current applicant, were they the ones that that requested and changed the zoning of the other two adjacent properties?
It is, no, they were not the original persons that rezoned, but Mr. Mastagassi is now the owner of all three.
And the original applicant, did he originally ask for the subject property to be zoned that RS22 and it was denied?
This property, I wanted to say, it has a special permit, not because of density or the size. It has a kennel. So the kennel uses require, I believe, a commercial zoning. And at that point, they used a special permit. Staff at the time recommended a special permit to allow that use.
I'm specifically talking about the subject property.
Sure. At that time, they elected not to rezone it for whatever reason. But there was, when I went back to the old staff reports, there was nothing to indicate why that property was left off.
So it was never requested, it just...
Correct.
Okay.
This has remained FR ever since annexation in 61.
I want to clarify something. I'm not sure I understood you correctly on this. This RS-22 parcel that is between the subject property and Ram.
This portion here.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought I was reading that as roughly the same condition as the subject property and being half APZ1, half APZ2. Is that not the case?
Under the time in which it was rezoned, it was a majority APZ2.
Okay.
Now it is touching both 1 and 2.
Okay, so it's it's roughly a similar in the current one. It's effectively grandfathered is what it amounts to.
Correct.
Yes.
Once the zoning is secured, the property owner can plat to that standard.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner York?
Thank you. As usual with these, when staff is recommending denial and an alternative, I just want to ask, has that alternative been run by the applicant? And
We did run it by the applicant. We didn't hear a response back.
Okay.
So he does not have a representative or an engineering firm handling the case. He's going solo on it. But I was hoping he would be here tonight to
I
kind
would
of
like
give
that as
his
well,
comment.
especially when you mentioned that the other adjacent properties have common ownership. So I assume they're going to submit a plat for the overall property. And my thought, not so much on density. I realize what staff's trying to do, and making a compromise on the density. But I'm assuming those two districts have some different setback standards and dimensions and so forth, mainly the setback. Usually, if they're trying to submit a plat, they're probably going to want some uniformity in their, the way their subdivision looks, even if these lots in this particular property have to be larger size.
It's a little bit of a difference. We actually just reduced not too long ago the setbacks for the side setbacks of RE from 25 feet to 15. So we've tried to make it a little more workable,
Okay.
especially because we would get so many requests for barns, garages, RV, kind of RV covers, and it was impacted because of that massive 25-foot side setback. So that's been reduced to 15. And then, as you know, our larger UDC rewrite, we are examining all of the districts just to make sure is form matching function.
The other thing I wanted to ask, and again, understand staff trying to make the compromise here since it's split in two zones, but as we've heard from the Navy in these presentations, the line is not precise. So it's, especially with the way it's curving there, it's in an APZ1. It seems, you know, it's accident potential. But what I'm getting at is, have we seen, has staff seen any layout from the development? Because even though that line is not precise, it might be nice to know if they're planning on how that layout would work, because it looks like they're going to need to do some type of drainage pond or something there.
Nothing has been submitted for review or even as a concept. So I can only make, to a degree, an assumption that the point of rezoning is to connect the three. But the land use statement simply says single-family subdivision. It didn't specify, I'm going to do a master plan of all three lots. For all I know, they're going to build one access point, and they can. There's nothing wrong with that when they plat. But I have to assume it's common ownership. More than likely, they will want to plat all three together and come up with a design.
Understood. And I know that's not necessarily part of what we need to take into account when making this zoning case. Was just curious on that. But I do, since there was no response, I wonder if this is better to table this item. Does staff have a position on that?
Our recommendation.
Are we
which
up against any type of clock or anything?
No, we notify them. Last week we send a reminder of the meeting along with a copy of the staff report and the presentation, ask if they have questions before, as we do with every zoning case, and we didn't hear a response.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff?
I got one other question.
Yes, sir.
I would assume that that APZ zone is a takeoff pattern, or is it an approach?
If I recall correctly, the inbound traffic is coming over the Laguna, so yes, it would be outbound. It would be a departure flight.
In the conversations that I've had with Ben and other representatives from the Navy, the biggest concern is with these accident potential zones is whether or not the area is a level wing area, and this is going to be definitely a hard bank, and so I'm inclined to deny any residential development in the APZ1 zone, and I wish there was an instrument that we could use to, designate that, but it kind of sounds like there isn't, especially without the applicant present. So I'm inclined to deny this at this point.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'll just ask, is the applicant here, which he's not. Is there any other public comment on item? If you would, please state your name and address for the record.
Joe Cramer, 1820 Walden Road. First off, I would like to say by Mazzagatti not being here sends a very strong signal that he either just isn't interested. I mean, he hasn't answered to the city. They gave him another suggestive idea of what to do. He's not here. I would like to bring this back to Mr. Miller at the beginning of the meeting when you said that y'all's determination is not about streets and sidewalks and all these other things that go into after, okay? Yours was, does it meet the requirements? Does it fit with the area? This does not. The area development plan has never been stated for multifamily homes there. It's been for these larger estate-style homes. Now, I will say that he was partially incorrect. That area there, where they're pitching over, that is a pitch-over area approaching for landing. So, and the reason they do that is to the other side of the airfield is all residential area. That's why this is a very dangerous area for multifamily homes. It really worries me that we don't take the Navy's suggestions of the AZ1 not being developed. There's a reason why the Navy's always been there, and they felt comfortable there, because there's no development there. We've seen on other areas where planes have crashed, and this very board approved that zoning. And it was I believe a 1 and a 2 in that same area. So I would beg y'all, please say no to this zoning. If they want to come back with a different zoning and go to the residential estates, the bigger lots, then I would see supporting that. But at this time, I would ask you to vote no.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shirley Thornton. I live at 1917 Woodcrest Drive. I'm also from Flower Bluff. I also worked on the Flower Bluff Area Development Plan. We worked together on that. And this very discussion came up. It was a big discussion. We had people from the Navy with us sitting there, and I have to agree, you just need to turn this one down. I also am going to encourage you to always take a look at the Flower Bluff Area Development Plan. We spent over a year on that. People who really care about what happens in our area, we took it very seriously, very seriously. And I sat at council yesterday on a Sweet Bay project, and I listened to them talk for hours, and it shouldn't have ever gotten to them. It shouldn't have gotten there. Mr. Schrader, you were the one who actually asked questions. You asked it on November 10th, and you asked, and then you got kind of cut off, and then you went quiet. I wish you would have kept asking anyway, because you were on the right track. There were so many issues, still so many issues with it. It got tabled, so now everybody's kind of, in a tailspin over that piece of property. It's really important that you reference the Flower Bluff Area Development Plan. That I know it's probably hard, but if somebody would have just driven down Sweet Bay, they would have seen it. If you just drive out and see this Ramfield piece, you'll see. Talk to the people who have already been there, lived there. They can tell you which way the water runs when it floods out there. And that developer could benefit from that knowledge as well. I'm not so sure that the developer is always interested in that, but I think that maybe this is a place, maybe all of you could help that happen. That would be great. The other thing is, this always seems backwards to me. Well, you do the rezoning first, and then you start talking infrastructure. That is so backwards. Yorktown, that whole area has insufficient infrastructure. The Ramfield area, insufficient infrastructure. It just seems so strange to go ahead and build a development and then think about it, because I can tell you that there is a development, a subdivision now. I have actually taken my kids boating with their little boats because it was built with nobody looking forward. Nobody saying, well, if we do this, what's going to happen? When you fail to ask if this, then what, then you fail to think about how it's going to affect people in the future. And that's what we've run into in Flower Bluff quite a bit. And as fast as these developments are going in, I don't know that anybody's thinking about all of this. So I really do thank you for your service. I know you're volunteers, and I just really, I pray for you. I hope that you'll say the right things, do the right things, really dig in. And there's nothing wrong with telling people to go back to the drawing board. I was a teacher. I made kids do it all the time.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Michelle Ewing, 1901 Caribbean Drive. First off, thank you. I was your spouse at one point. My husband was on the building standards and codes committee. And we do have quite a bit of experience with development and land. And my property is adjacent to the subject property. If you look on the screen that's there right now, you'll see where it's a four corners. I'm the diagonal up. I'm also the one that provided you with all the flooding pictures. That is my home. That is what happens when people start to develop things out in that area and don't take infrastructure into account. That's a story for a whole nother day. But I have been to city council meetings. I have talked to the Streets Department, formerly Richard, now Roland, and on what we can do. I do understand, Mr. Miller, what you were saying earlier about, the infrastructure is not why we're here. At this point, I'm taking this as an opportunity to sing from the hills to please say no to this. I don't care if it's 1 acre homes or half acre homes. I really don't. I have enough brush back there that I'm not going to see anything. I just don't want to be flooded out of my home. It is to a point where the people across the street from us, she's a cardiac anesthesiologist, she can't get out sometimes in the middle of the night if she's on call. I can't get my kids to school. If it's going to rain really, really hard, I have to go pick my kids up from school early so that I can make it through my gate. The area, the subject area is, it's one of the lowest spots in Flower Bluff. And I'm the very lowest spot. In order to build, they are going to have to build up. They're going to have to build up, and that water's going to have to go somewhere. And it is most likely coming to my property or next door, which both are natural ponds that have been there. They are on the 1960s maps. They're on the 1940s maps. It is a natural birding area. There's just so many things that this development is going to mess with in our area. I just hope that you will say no. Thank you.
Thank you. Would please state your name and address for the record?
Randall Arnold, 4202 Walden Road. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your time and thank you for your service. I would echo the comments made for the 3 previous people in front of me. My wife and I live just south of Waldron Field in the FR zone property on the approach end of the north-facing runway out there. And as a pilot, I would echo Mr. Miller's comments and concerns about safety and landing and what is all involved in what the Navy does for the city. And I would caution any development in that area, not necessarily just this property, that would go counter to secure air safety and building in Flower Bluff. And I would echo Mr. Miller there that this property and those like it should, if they're already zoned FR, they should remain that way. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Aaron Costilla. I live at 2020 Ramfield Road. I'm actually the property in the center right there, the special use permit for Bluff Boarding Kennels. Been there for over 15 years, and I've seen all different types of flooding, especially like Hurricane Harvey. I couldn't even leave my property. It was that bad just going down the road. I didn't have enough time to print it out, but I do have some pictures on a flash drive, but showing the severity of the flooding in there and actual video. You can see the rushing water coming all the way from Waldron Field, cutting through everyone's property, going through the subject property right here. So everyone else has kind of hit on what I was going to talk about. So I would just keep it short and sweet, and I would go with Mr. Miller's recommendation of not building that property, because if anything is developed there, for one, it's going to have to be raised up dramatically. All that water is going to go in someplace, Michelle's property, my property, or our neighbors. And I just don't want to see my kennel or my animals get flooded out, and the potential of that. But that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Christi Ray. I live at 2020 Ramfield Road. I'm an RN. I serve the community. I've been serving the hospice community for 22 years. I've lived on the center property there that you see, just subject to the red area. I've lived there since 2016. Since the developments have gone in, I have seen more and more flooding. I have had to call in not being able to serve our hospice patients in the community because I could not safely leave the property once it got flooded in. Also, I'd like to speak as a layman towards the planes and the safety of the planes. Literally, I make a joke of it, but it's the safety of our Navy. Turn at the White House, or turn at the big white barn with the blue trim. They bank. You can hear them just banking right at our house every day, and then turning back towards this property to go back to the landfill. So as a layperson, I know I've seen these planes land for years, and it's the safety of these people, this flooding that's happening all around us as all of these half-acre, one-acre estates come in. It's just getting more and more. We need to think about the infrastructure. This is a huge, I mean, I see it, I hear it. The wildlife being encroached out of their land. I mean, we did not see deer, we did not see coyotes. Now they're in our backyard. So y'all, we need to think about, you know, the other things that are happening as well. Thank you for your time. My vote would be no.
Thank you. All right. Any other public comment on item number 10? With being done, I will go ahead and close the public comment period and look for a recommendation.
So I actually got a question. I apologize. I know we're beyond that, but I meant to ask this earlier and got into asking about the procedural stuff about recommending something different. I wanted to ask, with this being in the APZ, whether it's 1 or 2, we've had some presentations from staff about upcoming potential amendments where some of these properties might actually be, you know, rezoned so that they can't be developed. So I am a little surprised that we've got one that is farm rural and staff's actually recommending to let it be zoned to where it can be developed. And I just wanted to ask staff, what was the discussion there and what was the reasoning for not just outright saying, no, you know, it's in APZ, we want to leave it farm rural?
Sure. With any property, like I mentioned before, we try to look at the pros and cons from the big picture. You know, as planners, we're looking at the 30,000-foot view first. And absolutely, because it's split between 1 and 2, it wouldn't make much sense to say denial on 5 acres and approval on 5 acres. We tried to find a compromise between the two, a logical compromise that obviously I can't say yes to 2 because, as we've all heard from the Navy, there's no paint lines in the sky. Planes can move in, planes can move out. Regardless, you'll be impacted by noise and some form of overhead traffic. And as the Navy has said over and over again, these are pilot trainees. These are their first, second year. Imagine a 16-year-old with a Ferrari. This is their first time in a plane. So we don't want to say no outright. I mean, obviously our goal as a department is to facilitate development. So we never want to just close the door and say, this is dead property, move on. Part of our goal is to say, we can't say yes maybe to what you're requesting, but here is something you should consider, which is why we're not officially saying you should absolutely say yes to RE. We are saying denial first and foremost, but we do like to present alternative options.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I also want to ask, like I mentioned before, we've been told, you know, just because there's a boundary between 1 and 2 doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're that much safer because you took 3 steps over. When these new policies, I know they haven't been written yet, but do you know what would the position be with this, you know, for APZ 1 and APZ 2 in the future when these new policies go? Would the recommendation at that, you know, at that time be that neither one are allowed anything?
At this point, we haven't really talked about the only districts we've created are the compatible districts for industrial and commercial. When it gets into the residential, those are more on a case-by-case basis. What is the applicant proposing? Are they finding any methods of mitigating potential risk? There's not really as much as I wish there was a simple answer. When it comes to residential development in any area, no matter which airfield you're surrounding, it's not as cut and dry as we can say, this is yes and this is no. Because there are going to be some that, you know, just like the previous case, the RV park, it's originally zoned multifamily, but you have a narrow road and you have a drainage ditch and it's in a flood, you know, a higher risk of a flooding area. Yes, the zoning allows for multifamily, but is that truly the best use? just in this scenario, you have farm rural zoning. It's kind of at the beauty of the eye of the beholder if FR is the highest and best use. So it's not that, again, we're trying to just close the door on all development, but what are some alternatives? Policy-wise, we haven't really gotten that far into how the ACUS integrates with our consultant that we've been discussing is just purely the zoning districts themselves. You know, should we have 3 multifamily districts? Could those be consolidated? The Navy standards that they have passed and are part of the UDC today, we were not planning, at least I can say we weren't planning on altering or making any policy change. But very much like you hear about ADPs, that's the macro level, rezoning is the micro. And not all are going to fit nice and neat in a pretty box. So we make the best call we can make, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but there's a lot of factors we take into consideration. So by no means are these light decisions or something we take blasé. We are saying denial, but we do want to always present our, not only planning commission, but city council alternatives for them to consider.
Understood, and thank you. Last thing I want to ask, and I apologize because I think this was touched on, but I stepped out. When the Navy's told us about some areas are more accident prone because of the, whether it's approach or not, or whether it's turning movement, can you confirm this, I believe, is one of the more dangerous areas, not talking APZ 1 or 2, but just because of what the pilots are doing in this area. Is that correct?
Well, I don't want to step on the Navy's toes, so I can only echo what Lieutenant Pollock has said to me, is that they prefer areas that are more straightaways. And he gave that's where I picked up the 16-year-old with a Ferrari. He said, do you want a 16-year-old Ferrari on the freeway, or would you prefer your 16-year-old in a nice little old Honda on a quiet residential street? And that means the straightaways are the quote-unquote, what he called not safer, but are stable flight patterns, to where banking and turns require that much more implementation of skill. And if you're learning a skill, obviously, when I was learning to drive, I was not a master of parallel parking, and I have the dented bumpers to prove it. So you're still learning banking, you're still learning some of these turning movements. While yes, not every turn is going to be dangerous, just like car collisions, nobody reports the near misses. And yes, we did take that into consideration of trying to, again, find that compromise, what could work for the developer.
Thank you.
I've got a few more comments before I make a motion, if that's okay. Kind of adding to, what Andrew was saying, the way it was explained to me is, so they established the APZ 1s and APZ 2s based on what the elevation of the airplane is going to be at that given time in that area. And the reason why in the APZ 2 they request no more than 2 dwelling units per acre is because engine dies, something happens, you have a little more elevation, and you're able to ditch the plane and avoid casualties on the ground. If you've only got 2 houses per acre, then you can find somewhere, a lane in between to ditch the plane. In an APZ 1, you have less of an opportunity in the event of a, engine failure or something like that, or another plane dropping in on top, to make those, adjustments and ditch the plane without any casualties on the ground. And one of the other reasons that I'm going to recommend we deny this is, I asked Andrew earlier about when the APZs changed, what changed in this area. When the former owner of the property requested the zoning, there's a reason why he did not request this piece of the property be rezoned RS22. It's because presumably he knew that it was in an APZ 1 and it was generally undevelopable, not to mention whatever elevation, issues or, barriers there were with the drainage and things of that nature. So I wanted to make sure that we weren't, because as planning commissioners, we, basically have the opportunity to make a very inexpensive piece of property extremely valuable based on, the recommendations that we make from this board. And, kind of like the Ocean Drive property and things of that nature, it's like, there's a reason why this has not been you know, a request for a zoning change, and why this particular piece of property in this configuration, because basically this diagonal line follows the curvature of that APZ. So there was knowledge before the property was purchased that this was probably not going to be developable property. Because I hate it when, you know, we downzone something because of a change in, like if the Navy comes in and expands an APZ and we have to go in and make a decision on whether or not to take something that's, you know, zone commercial and downzone it, you know, then that's a really hard deal, tough pill to swallow. So, you know, on this one, I'm gonna maintain my recommendation of denial. And do you have some comments?
I want to make a couple of comments before, because I'm not sure that I do think the residents' concerns on flooding are very critical to this, although we don't have a legal mechanism to address them in this form. I do think it's important to comment on, so I'll make a couple of brief comments on that. And related to also the APZ issue is we often look at this stuff because largely we have to, solely as drawing lines over land. The reality is that should be applied to things like this is effectively the Navy is looking for as low a density as they can get so that it gives their pilots place to put down a plane. Where that is exactly, no one knows. Exactly how tight the turn is, it's ridiculous. It's useless to speculate on that too much. It's the real critical factor there is just to try to keep a density at a level that is reasonable for the risk of activity that they're doing, and that's about all we can hope to do. The second part of this is that you all experience a great deal of flooding in this area, partly because of the nature of the area. It's extremely low. And the way that many areas that sort of get it, you know, you look at what Houston has been forced to do. You know, they've hit their head against the wall for years, just letting all this floodwater run off in these areas and not really thinking through how to deal with it. And you finally start to see some of these areas really think about, okay, people are going to be here. We have to coexist with these flood conditions. How do we do that? You don't do it by putting houses on little piles of dirt and one here, one here, one here, and one here. They're not designed to coexist with each other. You group them together and you let the land tell you how to shape those other areas so that you can leave more of the land to absorb the water, to retain it, and to do that. Now, whether or not this developer would consider that, I don't know. We don't have the means to do that other than just say you can or you can't. But we're not going to be, we're a recommending body. So if we say absolutely not, you can't do that, if they hold more sway with a council member, they'll get that changed or whatever. But the reality is encouraging sound development. And the way they should do that is consider all of these three properties in a way that puts the density they're allowed and group those homes so that the floodwater can be dealt with. So I would encourage you to, approach developers of these areas, because it's not just this property, it's all these other properties around you. To be smarter about these developments, they all need to be residential estate developments or at that level of density. And some of these could be RS22 if they're done properly. But it's not about cutting out postage stamps everywhere and dropping a home on a little hill. That's not going to help them or anybody else. It doesn't work on these smaller lots. So I would encourage you to look at these ways that these other areas have been developed in other parts of the country where they're forced to deal with and live with floodwater, because that's what's going to help these developments improve how they're developed and be good neighbors, because that's ultimately what you want, is a good neighbor. And the conventional subdivision model doesn't work well everywhere, and this is an area that doesn't do that. So my personal opinion is I think staff has made a recommendation that's probably about the best thing we can do for the overall thing. But I think Mr. Miller's already going to be making a motion, so I'm going to leave it up to him to do that. But I did want to share those comments because we've got to start thinking about this stuff better and being good neighbors to each other. Otherwise, we're not going to solve the problems.
All right, can I get a motion on item number 10?
I'll make a motion that we deny the zoning request.
I'll second that.
Can I go ahead and get a individual vote count, please?
Sure. And that's just outright deny, right? We're not going with RE, just to be
That's
more specific.
straight denial,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Chairman Dibble? Okay. Vice Chairman Schrader?
I agree with the motion.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner York?
Aye.
Commissioner Mandel?
Aye.
And Commissioner Salazar Garza. Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to item number 11. Do understand that Planning Commission is just a recommending body, so City Council ultimately has the authority on this development, so keep your eyes peeled for upcoming council minutes.
March 22nd is our projection.
Okay, March 22nd is a projected date that this will go to council.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking next cycle. March 8th is correct. I apologize. I'm always on the next one. That's the thing about zoning is we always live in 3 cycles. There's the cycle coming out of council, the one coming to commission, and the one going to council. So dates are always flying. So on this item, first and foremost, we would like to request that this item be tabled. So I'm going to treat this more like a briefing and quickly go through these proposed text amendments. The reason we're going to ask for tabling is we're going to have some outreach meetings with the building community to get more feedback from them. But we thought we'd take advantage of the opportunity of still being in front of Planning Commission and getting your feedback as we work through the process. So starting with just there are 3 major sections of text amendments. The first is all about master preliminary plats. The second is about timeframes for plat extensions, which I know always seem to pop up on every agenda. And the last has been an ongoing discussion with council about garages and the overhanging into sidewalks, but I'll get into that one individually. First and foremost, on master preliminary plats, as you know, we're trying to reinstitute the use of them, meaning instead of going through your preliminary and final only, if you have a large development, so think all of King's Crossing, all of London Town, all of some of these other King's Landing, you're starting off with hundreds of acres. And many times the applicant will turn in a preliminary plat that is extremely detailed. They're going to get down to the unit number, and it is 60 lots for this unit and 50 lots for this unit. And it becomes detailed to the point that any change at the final almost automatically necessitates a change and an amendment to the preliminary. And you end up in this endless loop of final to amendment. Instead, having master preliminaries and preliminaries only have density. So if you have unit 4 and you're anticipating a density of 6 units per acre, regardless of how you end up changing your lot design, that will be finalized at the final. As long as your RS6 or RS 4.5 for that section matches the density on the master preliminary. It will save a ton of time, energy, and effort when it comes to this constant amendment process. Because every time staff has to go back, look at the final, and count the lots and make sure there are no extra lots that were created that's somehow different from the preliminary. So it's kind of exhausting. So with the first step in fixing this process is, first and foremost, master preliminary plats should not have an acreage cap. Whether instead of single family having capped at 300, what if I have 301? What if I have 400? It didn't really make sense of why we put these caps into place. I'm sure it made sense in 2010 when the UDC was drafted. doesn't quite make sense in 2022 as we're seeing these larger developments come in London and the Calallen area. So we're requesting that that be stricken. The second part, as I mentioned, focusing on density and striking the phrase number of units. So we're not getting into, you have 60 units today or 14 lots and tomorrow it's 15 lots, so you have to do an amendment. Let's focus on density, less on the detail until you get to final. Time extensions, which is the next big topic. As you know, every time a time extension comes before you, the applicant is buying 6 months. So if I have ongoing public improvements and I'm getting too close to that expiration date of my plat, I'm coming in, I'm saying I need another 6 months. Well, one thing we've learned over the past 2 years is, one, material costs do not stay consistent, and nor who knows what COVID does not only to the labor force, but just process as a whole. So we're proposing to change not only the plat expiration date, meaning you don't have to complete everything in 6 months, that changes to 12, but also if a time extension is warranted and granted by the commission, instead of just buying another 6 months, you are buying another 12 months, a little more reasonable time frame. The building community has said maybe that could be even larger, but at this point, we would feel a little comfortable with 12. The reason we picked 12 is not just because it's a nice round number for 1 year. It's also weighing into the idea of code changes. If we change in building code or we change to the UDC, that's usually not happening every single year on a large scale to where it could affect the plat. The reason for that is we don't want to get into this plat was vested under this code and now we're transitioning to this one and we have to weigh the two. It makes sense that if you need a year, you have a year to get everything together. And then lastly, if you're keeping pace at all with the ongoing discussion on our wonderful RS 4.5 district with City Council, a few of the members are not the biggest fan of that district, and their biggest complaint is the 20-foot setback, the street yard setback. And the common complaint is that if I have an F-250, which everybody seems to use that as the example, I park it in my driveway, the bumper and the hitch and a portion of the bed is overhanging into the sidewalk, which means if a person or a person with an ADA issue is traveling down the sidewalk, they're having to go into the driveway to walk around and then back into using the sidewalk. So they are asking of us to change just the setback for garages to 25 feet, meaning your structure will stay at 20. Your porch, your front facade of the home, that would stay at 20, but just the garage itself would have to be set at 25 to buy that extra 5 feet. At this point, those are the three main amendments. Now, as Nina will mention during the director's report, we're still working on a much larger scale UDC rewrite process with our consultant. So these are just small things that we see are kind of daily occurrences, daily things that come up before Planning Commission, especially with time extensions, that we can fix now. We don't want to wait till we get to that big code cycle. If they're simple amendments, let's just do it now. But in doing our outreach process with the building community, we wanted to at least brief this board first in case you get, wonderful phone calls, which I'm sure you may receive as soon as they start to see our presentations, but you would be informed and we could get some preliminary feedback from you of how you feel about these amendments.
Andrew,
Yes,
quick
sir.
question on the 25-foot setback, and obviously I wasn't a huge fan of the landscaping ordinance, but I think in this 4.5 zoning district, this kind of compounds the problem, because I think there was, if I remember right in the landscaping ordinance, there was some new requirements that got layered in there in terms of maximum amount of impervious structure. So now you're adding more impervious structure here. Did y'all kind of look at what the true impact in that 4.5 with the zoning? I mean, builders are going to squeal because it's 5 more feet of driveway, and it's $400 or $500. But what's going to happen on that impervious requirement, and how much is that going to impact?
You're absolutely right. So right now we're conducting a photo survey. We're having a few of our staff members go out at various times of the day, especially when we know that folks are going to be home. So taking a picture at 1 o'clock doesn't really tell the story. Taking a picture probably at 5 or 6 would tell more of the story if there is an actual overhang issue. Now, some of the photos that were already collected were, of course, only spotting the infractions. It's not telling the whole story, and that's part of our presentations, is to tell the big picture. You are absolutely right that adding 5 more feet does contribute to that 50% cap on impervious surface in your street yard. Other things that we're discussing is maybe it's the street design itself that could be looked at. Instead of having that 2-foot gap between the sidewalk and the curb, putting the sidewalk right behind the curb, and you pick up 2 feet of grassy area. Yes, you're still overhanging to the right-of-way, but you're no longer blocking a sidewalk. There are other creative solutions. But believe me, we did take into those accounts, so we're not just taking this amendment lightly. It's an idea, but that's exactly why we're having the discussion.
And Mr. Chairman, we will be looking at some site plans, actual site plans, and, to measure the impact to it. You're absolutely right. We need to see if it's workable, how that's going to impact the open space requirement and the impervious requirement.
And I know, and I appreciate that. I think one of the things, and I know the city doesn't really enforce deed restrictions, but a lot of these subdivisions are deed restricted, and now when we have a new requirement before it was adopted, it just, especially in that RS6 and RS 4.5, I think this just becomes challenging for sure.
A question on, when we did that committee that I was on a while back with the group of amendments, is there a committee like that that staff is discussing with on these, little individual ones that come by, or is that, how's that happening?
So on the ones that are definitely going to warrant discussion, yes. The small ones, I don't anticipate too much pushback on the master preliminary, making things a little more efficient in how we do our processes. So I try to value the committee's time, because just like this board, you're volunteers. I don't want to call you in for every single movement of a period or a comma, but when it does have a greater impact, especially like impervious surface, that is why, our discussion at our task force meeting was let's take a step back on these amendments, have that greater discussion, involve those groups that are out there, at least to get some feedback if there's something obvious that we're just not seeing. It's the old saying, you can't see the forest through the trees. When we're in on this day in, day out, hearing the complaints, we try to come up with a solution. It's our hope as we have discussions with the community, if there's something obvious that we're not seeing, like impervious surface is a perfect example, that's why we have the discussion. But yes, we're involving groups. We're going to be meeting with the Builders Association next month.
How do we get on that list? Because as you know, in that group, I was one of the more vocal ones because I deal with this stuff every day. So when you move a comma or change one word, there are impacts, and I can see what those impacts are going to be. So, not that my opinion all matters, but it's helpful to have someone there that does this for a day, and not just, developers. Obviously, they have a voice, but they come from one side. And it's nice when we had that group, we had, whatever that, there's a term for it, I guess, the diverse something, but, diverse stakeholders group. So there was a layperson, engineer, architect, builder, and so on and so forth. But is that something that we can do? So I know we hear with these come up, if they're contentious, it's, well, we met with the Builders Association, but I would love to be, and we're all busy, but I don't mind, because again, I have to deal with
Commissioner,
it.
in fact, we were discussing it today because we wanted to reconstitute the group for the UDC amendments that will be upcoming.
Careful what you wish for.
And so we can,
I know, but
we can jumpstart it and see if we can get the group together.
Sure, that'd be
again.
great. Thank you.
First thing tomorrow, I can email this out to the group.
Just one comment on the 25-foot thing. I just happened to see this in the news with a zoning case that came across over in Portland. And granted, this was a comment from a quote-unquote large developer. I hadn't heard of them before, but there might be some truth to their point. And they said that they were talking against a 25-foot setback, saying that that's actually too much room, and it encourages people to double stack their cars, which then means they hang out into the street. And I thought there might be some truth to that.
So yes, we were. Somebody did happen to forward a few of the staff members that article. They're dealing with what they call R5, so they have 5,000 square foot lots compared to our 4.5. They're a little wider. They're 50 foot, where 4.5 is only 45. So to an extent, they're right, because they're wider lots. They're picking up another 5 feet. You could have tandem double stacking of cars. Mm-hmm. So I wish there was a perfect solution. It seems like you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. you have an impervious surface issue, you have fitting the trees, you have, and we're going to go in October to now to 2 trees. So now it's, well, how am I going to fit more driveway and 2 trees? But at the same time, it is happening to where we do get phone calls of saying, I can't walk down my sidewalk, or I can't push my aunt or my grandmother in the wheelchair because I constantly have to get in the driveway, and now they're leaning at that grade. So I think at the end of the day, it's a combination of design and enforcement. It's not, one is not going to fix it. It's going to be come up with some design options and then realize your street might get papered with tickets because folks are blocking the sidewalk. And that's just going to have to be how to address this issue. There's no one magic text amendment and it goes away.
Sure. Well, one last thing, in case this one doesn't come to any group, it might be a good idea to strike that not including an alley, because if we're worried about people sticking out, may not want them sticking out in the alley either, because I think that's usually where the trash trucks and utility vehicles drive through.
It's an old remnant, so I don't know if any of you were fortunate enough to work with the old Corpus Christi zoning ordinance, which is what existed before the UDC. That one, for this one line, it was 3 paragraphs back then, and it got into curved driveways because of alleys and service areas, and you would have a side-facing garage. So if you pulled into an alley, off of an alley, you would curve in your driveway to the garage door. And the fight back then was, well, then do I measure the 20 feet on a curve that the garage door is then from the alley 20 feet? And so that was our opportunity to try to consolidate that to 3 sentences. Like anything else, you kind of lose the story when you consolidate, but that's the short version. But I agree that it needs to be clear on how alleys are addressed. Maybe it should say side-facing.
Like we did in that group, trying to get to the intent. We just don't want cars sticking out, so.
Correct.
It is challenging, trying to find the right way to word things, so.
It's illegal today, and I always have to say that. It's illegal to block a sidewalk today. So, like I said, no text amendment's just going to magically make the problem go away, but we have to try to do something.
Commissioner Miller?
I think the biggest issue that we face is there was a time when RS 4.5 and RS 6 were zoning districts because it was more affordable homes. Now RS 4.5 and RS 6 are becoming the default, right? So you've got $300,000 and $400,000 houses sitting on these tiny lots. And, I had to prove it to my wife because she told me that I was lying to her, but I measured my street and I measured her sister's street. My street is an old neighborhood that's got mostly side wrap garages and stuff like that. Her sister lives in I think it's an RS6. They're at the Hogan Homes at kind of like Woodridge and also Creek Parkway. And you go down to her street and at any given time, you've got 2 cars in the driveway, you've got 2 cars out front. Well, that completely eliminates everything, and it's on both sides, right? So from a life safety standpoint, if there was a fire on there and you had a fire truck coming through there and there's any other traffic on the street, it's just going to get completely jammed because 2 cars coming at each other with 2 cars on either side on a 28-foot back-to-back. Somebody's got to figure out a place to sneak into a driveway approach or something to let the other car by. So, from a development standpoint moving forward, I look at all of these RS 4.5s that we're approving out in London, and I understand the developer's desire to put as many lots on a piece of property and maximize the value, especially with all the fees and expensive development costs and stuff like that. But we've got the land. Let's start doing some little bit bigger lots and using some of these older methods of side wrap garages or longer driveways or something of that nature to help mitigate. Because I look into my crystal ball and I look 20 years from now. And all of the new RS 4.5 developments that have been built in the past 5 years, and I ask myself, what are these things going to look like? And it's kind of a scary thought, what that's going to look like in 20 or 30 years. So I'm all for density. I think this town is not nearly as dense as it should be, but that density should be vertical. You know, as opposed to trying to shove a bunch of people in single-family homes on a bunch of less than 4,500 square foot lots. I mean, we see a lot of PUDs that are less than that, so. I don't know, we need to start getting smart about looking towards the future.
Well, what's
Go ahead.
what's driving that is obviously cost. I mean, developers are constantly saying we're pressured to keep home prices down. We've got these things that keep raising them up. Landowners want more for the land all the time, and so the cost per square foot goes up, both on the actual structure and the cost of the land, and it's effectively squeezing more people out of what's considered traditional home ownership. I think the thing that we're going to continue to put Band-Aids on this until we decide to come up with a better way of laying out property in the way that society has shifted, because we're shifting into a situation where whatever is considered an average earner these days has as much or more in their car than they do in their dwelling. And the model that puts that physically down on and how we get people to and from those lots and so on and so forth, that doesn't accommodate that model well. Anyway, so you have regular streets that look like alleyways because you've got 4 vehicles in front of every home, or really large ones and so forth, and meanwhile that lot size has gone down to get that home price down, and so on and so forth. So that's that's our
Everybody's using their garages.
right. Well, they're full of stuff.
They're
Yeah.
full of stuff. I know. Can developers start building storage buildings in the back so that we can start utilizing the garages?
Well, does a conventional garage even hold an F-150 now? With it,
Yeah.
so
I
Stores have gotten bigger since my 1995 alone. The head height on the doors is that.
Like, this is really gonna be a within time. Problems in the future. There's a couple of new developments. And vision in 10 years. Positive side of it. I've heard of it when I went to, I ran into this, New York. Was raised in Dallas, and him and his wife had come down, and he said, they moved him and his in-laws down this new development, which was the RS 4.5. So as he came down to that seminar, he was saying to his wife, let's go by there where we used to grow up in the neighborhood. And very bad condition. And so because I had that in mind, the RS 4.5, thinking, where are we going with this? And what do we do? And that's going to take a look at another 50 years. We're not going to be here. Those developments will be. Right away, what is the best solution making this work? Trying to find that balance, you know? Because I am for growth of the city, but growth in the city nice and no flooding. You know, we don't want to be a downtown Houston, in an area where we didn't set that foundation right or do this. RS 4.5s are going to be something.
That discussion is happening. The meetings we've had with the consultants going over their early proposals. One of our very first meetings, I'm sure Nina will attest also, is which districts just work. And that included, do we have too many residential districts? Should we have a 4-5? Should it be RS5? Or should we not even have something that small? By no means did we make a final decision, but we were asking those questions for that very reason. What's it going to look like 20, 30 years from now? Same thing with roadway width. Yes, for the years it's been fined at 28-foot pavement sections, but maybe it should be 30, maybe it should be 35. It's not going to just be one simple answer. It's going to have to be a collection of changes of just how we do things to address not only just fitting cars and parking, but we're seeing, I think, Elena Hugh, who's one of our new senior planners, can attest. There's not a day that goes by we don't get a call about a home occupation. What can I do in my house as a business? So folks are moving out of the business environment of getting a tenant space and moving back into their home, or their in-laws want to move in with them and they want an accessory dwelling unit. So you're going to have to provide vehicle space for them because now there's going to be 6 people on the lot. So it's only going to, not to sound like a doomsday person, but it's not going to get better. It's something we're really going to have to take a hard look of where are these folks going to park, because very much so, everybody wants their own car. So 6 people, 6 cars, right or wrong, but I don't know. The symptoms are there.
Andrew, a quick question.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know if this is a code enforcement, but I mean, what kind of volume of calls are you actually getting on this, on the, I mean, do we know how many people are calling because they, trucks in the sidewalk? Do we know citations? I mean, I know maybe some on the council don't like it, but how big of a problem is this really? Because to me, there's a pretty simple fix to this, and that is, if you got an F-250 pickup truck, write them enough tickets to where they don't park in the driveway, and right. If you got a 20-foot, driveway, you're gonna have to park on the street.
I can tell you, I've asked for those numbers a few times, and it's funny. You would think code enforcement is the first group that does this, and it actually isn't. It's a police department. There's a actual parking enforcement division. They only have a handful of officers, and most of them work in the uptown, downtown area. If you're like me and you got a meter ticket, so I can say that they're working. But there's, at the time, the last time I spoke with them, which it's been about a year and a half, there was only one officer that was on quote-unquote patrol for the rest of the city, patrolling what they called neighborhood beat, which means they would say, today I'm working Cal Allen, and I'm going to paper this area, and tomorrow it may be the south side, and it's very much complaint-based. Folks call in and say, hey, all these guys, there's junk vehicles, there's unattached trailers, they're blocking the sidewalk, whatever. That person may go out, and you might paper that neighborhood on Monday, and folks will stop doing it for a few months, and then they'll start again, just, like speed traps. They'll stop speeding for a little while, and then they'll start again. It is a lot to do with enforcement that I think code enforcement needs to at least become involved. I'm sure now they're writing citations for that issue, but it's this balance of what is code enforcement versus more police department function. And that's going to be one way to address it. But I have been asking for those numbers of how many citations are they actually writing and what are the hot spots of the city of where those citations are occurring. I haven't gotten that answer yet, but I'm going to keep on them about it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation on this. I'm sure we'll all be anxious to hear more. Do we have a director's report tonight?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly update you on the UDC update. If you recall, in September, we contracted with Cameros. It's a consulting firm to review the UDC and recommend amendments to the UDC. They used the UDC evaluation, which had been done about 3 years ago, as their base documentation. This fall, they conducted some stakeholder interviews and have also worked with our technical committee, our staff technical committee, and we've been having some additional outreach to some representatives of the island as well, because of course they sort of have a unique special interest in the character of their area as well. So right now we're at the stage where they're going to begin drafting the amendments for the zoning, the chapter concerning zoning, landscaping, buffers, and parking. And then there'll be sort of a phase 2 where we'll deal with the subdivision provisions. And so we're sort of, it's not moving forward equally, right? So more than likely we'll be seeing the zoning amendments first and then later the subdivision. But we do want to reconstitute the DSTAG, which is the Development Services Task Force Action Group. Does that sound right? Or Technical Action Group, I think is what it is. Development Services Technical Action Group. And as Mr. York said, it's a group of diverse individuals that, laid eyes on the amendments and, provided recommendations based on their expertise or their interests. So we're going to start doing that. We're looking at probably our public involvement phase early April, May time period, but just wanted to give you an update. So we'll have the DSTAG evolve. We'll also be, having general stakeholder meetings as well, like a general audience type meeting that individuals would be able to attend in addition to the technical committee reviewing that. And so that's our update at this time on the UDC amendment process. Any questions?
I do have one. It was talked about a while back that there's going to be a large-scale or broad overhaul of the street standards, and it was something that was going to, obviously be a big deal. So it's going to have community, stakeholder, all that. Is that something that's under the consultant's scope, or is that something that's going on separate, or is that still moving forward? I haven't heard anything about it.
The subdivision chapter will be under
So that's
review by
Section
the
8 or-
consultants.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have to formally do anything with the UDC item since it's?
No, just treating it as a briefing.
Okay.
And
That's right, we don't have to
it'll
table it?
come back at some point once we do a little more outreach.
Are there any future agenda items?
No, do you have a question though? What happened to our trainings? Are we implementing that again at some point?
I can. I didn't want to drag a late meeting even longer.
I'm all for that. I was just curious because
No, you're not off the hook yet, but I just didn't want to add insult to injury because I know that the COVID briefings push everything back, and believe me,
Appreciate that.
it gets. For the time being, yes. So I'm hoping that as soon as we go back to maybe monthly briefings, I can pick back up on the training sessions, and that way we're not here till 10 o'clock at night. But not that I'm going to have that much training, but just.
Okay, no future agenda items. We'll make a motion. Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn? I guess so. We'll adjourn.